Let me tell you something about the universe, and I say this with the full weight of 400 years of spacefaring experience behind me. Every species, every civilization, every empire that has ever stretched its claws across the stars has one thing in common. They all fear the unknown. They fear it the way you fear the dark. They fear it the way prey fears the silence before the strike. Every species, without exception, until we found the humans. My name is Vorkas. I am a senior intelligence officer of the Druun Collective, a civilization so ancient that we have watched 3 suns die from our observation decks. We have catalogued 942 species across 4 galaxies. We have watched civilizations rise, burn, collapse, beg, survive, and vanish. We thought we had seen everything. We had not. It was the year of the 3rd alignment when our deep-range scout vessel, the Pelvi 9, first picked up signals from a small, unremarkable blue planet in a spiral galaxy we barely considered worth mapping. The planet sat in what we called a soft zone, meaning it was not too hot, not too cold, not too close to pulsar, and not interesting enough to bother with. Our probes had tagged it decades earlier with a single note in the database. Organic life, pre-space, likely primitive, low priority. Low priority. I want you to hold that phrase in your mind for a moment. My colleague, a Druun analyst named Pelvi, was the first to flag the signal anomaly. She walked into my office, placed a data chip on my desk, and stared at me with the kind of expression scientists make when they're either about to change history or have made a terrible mistake. With Pelvi, it was usually the second one. Vorkas, she said very slowly. The blue planet launched something. I looked at the chip. I looked at her. Launch what exactly? A probe, she said. A very small, very fragile, very slow probe. It is made of metal alloys so basic that our entry-level students use stronger materials in their classroom projects. It has a communication antenna that can barely reach past its own moon. And it is currently, as we speak, drifting directly toward the gravitational field of its neighboring gas giant. I lean back in my chair, and this is concerning why. Pelvi placed both of her upper hands flat on my desk, because they put a recording on it, Vorkas, a golden recording, with music and mathematical diagrams, and the sound of a human child laughing. There was a silence in the room that lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted. They sent a message, I said. To anyone who might find it, Pelvi confirmed. Into the void, I added. Into the absolute, total, complete void, she said, nodding. Into a darkness so vast that their own science told them the odds of anyone finding it were practically 0. And they put a child's laughter on it. Now, I want you to understand something. The Druun Collective, when we launched our first deep space probe, sent it encrypted, armed with a self-destruct mechanism, and accompanied by a written warning in 47 languages that essentially said, if you are reading this, and you are not us, please do not come to our planet. That was our approach to the unknown. That was the rational, logical, survival-oriented approach that every single one of the 942 species we had ever encountered also took. The humans sent music and a laughing child. I filed a report. The High Council of the Druun Collective received it, reviewed it, and responded with the official designation. Peculiar anomaly, further monitoring required, which in Druun bureaucratic language means, this is strange, and we are mildly nervous but will absolutely pretend we are not. We watched. For years, we watched. We watched them fail and try again. We watched their first rockets explode on the launch pad, and then watched the engineers stand in the smoke, covered in ash, looking at their notes, and immediately begin planning the next attempt. We watched them lose colleagues to the cold silence of space, hold ceremonies, grieve openly, cry in front of cameras, and then, not a year later, strap themselves into another metal tube pointed at the sky. And every single time, every single one of them was smiling. Not a nervous smile, not a desperate smile, a genuine, warm, completely sincere smile. Like the universe was a gift they had not finished opening yet. The High Council upgraded the file from low priority to immediate surveillance. And somewhere deep in my chest, where Druun do not admit to feeling things, something very small and very quiet whispered, "We are not ready for these creatures." The moment humans reached their own moon, the Druun collective held an emergency session. Not a scheduled meeting, not a quarterly review. An emergency session, the kind we reserve for supernova threats, rogue AI uprisings, and the occasional moment when the Pelgorian Empire decides to invade someone at breakfast. We held it because a species that had only recently figured out indoor plumbing had walked onto a celestial body, planted a flag on it, and then returned home safely, and celebrated like they had won something. I attended that session personally. I sat in a hall full of beings who had conquered 17 star systems, and every single one of them was watching the human broadcast footage with the same expression. The expression of someone who has just realized that the small dog they adopted is, in fact, a wolf. Our chief strategist, a Druun elder named Quas, pulled up the footage of the human astronaut stepping onto the lunar surface. The transmission was grainy. The audio crackled. The human's voice broke slightly as he spoke those now famous words about steps and leaps. Then Quas paused the footage, turned to the assembled council, and said in the driest voice I have ever heard across 4 galaxies. They named it the Sea of Tranquility. There is no sea. There is no tranquility. It is a barren rock covered in craters and radiation. And yet they named it beautifully anyway. Nobody laughed, because nobody found it funny. They found it deeply, profoundly unsettling. Over the following decades, my surveillance team expanded. We had 12 analysts dedicated entirely to monitoring the blue planet. Pelvi led the division. She stopped sleeping properly around year 3, which I understood completely, because the humans kept doing things that made proper sleep impossible. They built a space station, a permanent one, floating above their planet like a tiny, fragile, completely impractical ring of ambition. Several of our analysts calculated the structural risks involved and submitted reports concluding that the station had a reasonable probability of catastrophic failure at any given moment. The humans knew this too. We intercepted their internal engineering documents. They knew every risk, every margin, and every worst-case outcome. They lived on it anyway. They grew food there. They did science there. One of them played a guitar in space and broadcast it back to the planet below. Pelvi walked in my office again. Same expression as the first time. "Vorkas," she said. "They are having fun up there." I stared at her. "In the station?" "In the station," she confirmed. In a metal tube floating in lethal vacuum, held together by engineering that our junior technicians would describe as optimistic. They are having fun. I took a very long breath. "File it. I've been filing things for 30 years, Vorkas." My filing cabinet is developing anxiety. The council debated for months about whether to make contact. The argument against contact was long, detailed, and supported by 942 historical precedents of first contact events going badly. The argument for contact was 3 words, submitted by Pelvi in a report that I still have framed somewhere in my office. The 3 words were, "They will anyway." She was right, because the humans were not waiting. They were already building the next thing, then the next thing after that. Their telescopes grew larger. Their probes went farther. They sent machines to neighboring planets and drove them around like toys, sending back photographs that they placed on the walls of their schools so their children could look at alien landscapes over breakfast. They were not preparing for space. They were already living in it, in their minds, in their plans, and in the way they named things. They named a rover Curiosity, not Caution, not Survival, not Strategic Reconnaissance Vehicle 7. Curiosity. The High Council authorized first contact in the 42nd year of our monitoring program. I led the delegation personally. We descended toward the blue planet in a vessel designed to be non-threatening, broadcasting greetings in every mathematical frequency we knew. My hands, I will admit, were not entirely steady. I had spent 42 years studying these creatures, and I still did not fully know what to expect. What I did not expect was the welcome committee. 14 humans stood on the ground where we landed. Scientists, diplomats, one person who appeared to be a journalist, and a small girl of approximately 8 years who had, according to our later understanding, simply refused to be left behind. They were smiling. Every single one of them. The scientists were smiling. The diplomats were smiling. The journalist was smiling. The small girl was waving. I stepped off the vessel. I stood before them. I had prepared a formal greeting in 11 languages. I had rehearsed it. I delivered it. When I finished, the lead scientist, a woman named Bora, with the kind of calm eyes that belong to people who have never once been frightened by something they could not yet explain, stepped forward and said very simply, "We have been hoping someone would show up. We made you something." She held out a small box. I opened it. Inside was a golden disc, a copy of the original recording from the very first probe, the one with the music, the one with the laughing child. I stood there holding a moment longer than was professionally appropriate. Pelvi, standing beside me, leaned slightly and whispered, "I told you we were not ready." She was right. We were not ready. No one in the galaxy was ready. Because no one in the galaxy had ever encountered a species that treated the unknown not as a threat to be destroyed, but as a door to be opened, with a smile, with music, and with a child's laughter carried on a golden disc into the dark. The galaxy had feared many things across its long and complicated history. It had feared the Pelgorian war fleets. It had feared the silence of dying stars. It had feared the collapse of ancient empires and the rise of new and hungry ones. It had never feared hope before, but standing on that blue planet, holding that golden disc, surrounded by creatures who smiled at things that should have broken them, I finally understood why it should. The galaxy feared many things across the stars, but it had never met a species that smiled at the unknown, until humanity smiled back at the darkness.